Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the screen. What he saw made his heart beat faster. A huge tower made of crystal stretched up into the purple sky of the planet below. The tower was so tall that its top disappeared into the clouds. Strange symbols covered its surface, and they seemed to glow with their own light. "Sir, we are picking up massive energy readings from that structure," said Lieutenant Amy Carter. She was looking at her control panel with wide eyes. "The power source looks like some kind of fusion reactor, but it is not like anything we have ever seen before." Jake nodded slowly. They had been exploring space for years, but nothing had prepared them for this. The planet was called Kepler 442b, and it was supposed to be empty. No life signs, no civilization, nothing. But the tower proved them wrong. Dr. Lisa Palmer was almost jumping up and down with excitement. She was the team's expert on ancient alien cultures. "Those symbols are incredible," she said, pointing at the screen. "This civilization must have been dead for thousands of years, but their technology is far beyond ours." Jake made his decision quickly. "Commander Stone, take a team down there. Be careful, but I want to know what that thing is." Commander Rick Stone gathered his away team. In the shuttle bay, besides himself, he took Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez, Dr. Palmer, and 4 security officers. As their shuttle flew toward the planet, the crystal tower grew larger and larger until it filled their entire view. "Look at the size of that thing," whispered one of the security officers. "It must be 20 kilometers tall." As they got closer to the tower, something strange happened. Weapon systems built into the tower's base suddenly came alive. Energy beams swept over their shuttle, but they did not fire. Instead, the beams seemed to scan the humans inside. "What is it doing?" asked Dr. Palmer nervously. Sam Rodriguez checked his instruments. "It is scanning us, but not like any scanner I know. It is looking at something specific." Then, just as suddenly as they had activated, the weapons powered down. A door opened in the base of the tower, big enough for their shuttle to fly through. "That is odd," said Rick Stone. "It is like the defenses recognized us somehow." They landed inside a huge chamber. The walls were smooth and covered with more of the glowing symbols. The air was breathable, which surprised everyone. Rick led his team out of the shuttle and toward what looked like the main entrance to the tower. Inside, they found rooms that seemed to go on forever. The ceiling was so high they could not see the top. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star maps and strange diagrams. But none of them were active. Dr. Palmer walked up to a control panel. It was covered with symbols that hurt her eyes to look at. They seemed to move and change, even as she watched them. Without thinking, she reached out and touched one of the symbols. The entire tower came alive. Lights blazed everywhere. The holographic displays activated, showing images of star systems, technological blueprints, and historical records. The symbols on the walls began to pulse faster, as if the tower was waking up from a long sleep. "What did you do?" asked Rick, but he was not angry. He was amazed. "I do not know," said Dr. Palmer. "I just touched it." The holograms began to tell a story. They showed images of space, of planets being built, of great ships traveling between the stars. The beings in the holograms were tall and looked almost human, but there was something different about them. They moved with purpose and seemed to possess incredible knowledge. Sam Rodriguez was studying the technological displays. "These power systems are incredible. They show reactors that could power entire planets. And look at these ship designs. They could travel faster than light in ways we never imagined." But it was Dr. Palmer who made the most important discovery. She had found a section of the archive that showed the builders of the tower. The holograms displayed clear images of the beings who had created this incredible technology. Her hands began to shake as she realized what she was seeing. "Rick, come here. You need to see this." Rick Stone walked over to where Dr. Palmer was. Standing, she pointed at the holographic display, and his jaw dropped. The beings in the images were definitely humanoid, but more than that, they looked exactly like humans. They had the same faces, the same body structure, even the same expressions. The most shocking part was what the holograms showed next. These human-like beings were working with primitive humans on what looked like ancient Earth. They were teaching them, helping them, showing them how to use tools and build shelters. "My God," whispered Rick, "these are not aliens at all. They are human." The discovery sent shockwaves through the away team. How could humans have built this technology thousands of years ago? How could they have traveled to other planets when Earth was still primitive? Dr. Palmer worked frantically to understand more of the archive. The hologram showed a vast civilization of these advanced humans. They had built cities on hundreds of worlds. They had helped other species develop their own technologies. They had been teachers, protectors, and explorers. "Look at this," said Sam Rodriguez. He had found schematics for the Crystal Tower itself. "This is not just a building. It is a database, a power station, and a communications hub all in one. They built these things all across the galaxy." The archive showed star maps with thousands of marked locations. Each mark represented another tower, another database, another piece of this incredible civilization. The scope of what these ancient humans had accomplished was staggering. But then the holograms showed something else. They showed disaster. A great catastrophe that had threatened to destroy everything. The images were unclear, but it looked like some kind of cosmic event. Maybe an exploding star, maybe something worse. The final holograms showed the advanced humans making a terrible choice. They could save themselves, or they could save the other species they had been helping. The images showed them working desperately to protect the younger civilizations, even as their own cities fell dark one by one. Rick Stone felt a chill run down his spine as he watched the final scenes. The advanced humans had given up everything. They had used their last resources to hide their technology, to protect the other species, and to preserve their knowledge for future generations. The very last hologram showed a group of these humans returning to Earth, but they were no longer the godlike beings who had built cities among the stars. They looked tired, defeated, but somehow peaceful. They had chosen to live simple lives among their primitive cousins rather than try to rebuild their lost empire. "They gave up their entire civilization," said Dr. Palmer quietly. "They sacrificed everything to protect others." Captain Morrison's voice crackled over their communicators. "Away team, report. We are detecting massive energy surges from your location." Rick Stone looked around at the incredible archive surrounding them. "Captain, you are not going to believe this. We have found something that changes everything we thought we knew about human history." As the away team prepared to return to their ship, Dr. Palmer took one last look at the holograms. They were still running, showing the same story over and over again. The story of a human civilization that had reached for the stars, achieved incredible things, and then given it all up for love of others. She realized that somewhere out in the galaxy, other species had probably found evidence of these ancient humans. But they would not have known what they were looking at. To them, these advanced beings would have seemed like gods or demons. They would have created legends about them, stories that would be passed down through generations. And all this time, the descendants of those ancient humans had been living on Earth, never knowing that their ancestors had once been the masters of the galaxy. Dr. Palmer smiled as she followed the others back to the shuttle. They had come looking for aliens, but instead they had found themselves. Back aboard the ship Frontier, Captain Jake Morrison could not sleep. The discovery they had made on the planet below was too big, too incredible to fully understand. He walked through the corridors of his ship, thinking about what they had found. Advanced humans from thousands of years ago. Technology that could power entire worlds. And somehow, it was all connected to Earth. Dr. Lisa Palmer had not left the lab for 3 days. She was working with every language expert and historian on the ship to translate the ancient records they had copied from the Crystal Tower. The holographic data was massive, containing thousands of years of history, but it was written in symbols that no human had seen before. "We are making progress," she told Captain Morrison when he visited the lab. "The language is complex, but it follows patterns. Dr. Alex Turner has been helping me map the grammar structure, and Professor Kate Williams found connections to ancient Earth languages." Dr. Turner looked up from his workstation. His eyes were red from staring at symbols for hours. "The amazing thing is that this language contains elements from dozens of human languages that would not exist for thousands of years after these. Records were made. It is like they could see into the future." Professor Williams was studying a holographic star chart that floated above her desk. "Look at this map," she said excitedly. "It shows human colonies and star systems we have never even heard of. They had settlements in the Vega system, around Arcturus, even in the galactic core region. The scope of their civilization is beyond anything we imagined." Captain Morrison studied the star map. Little points of light marked hundreds of human settlements scattered across the galaxy. "How many people are we talking about based on these records? Probably billions," said Dr. Palmer. "They had been expanding across the galaxy for over 10,000 years before the disaster happened." The disaster. That was what they had started calling the cosmic event shown in the final holograms. Dr. Turner had been trying to understand what exactly had happened to destroy such an advanced civilization. "The records are not completely clear," he explained, "but it looks like it was some kind of stellar explosion. Maybe a hypernova or gamma-ray burst from a nearby star. The energy release would have been enough to sterilize entire star systems." But the more they translated, the more incredible the story became. These ancient humans had not just built cities on other worlds. They had become teachers and protectors to dozens of other species. The records showed them sharing technology with primitive alien civilizations, helping them develop their own cultures, protecting them from dangers they could not handle alone. "They called themselves the Keepers of Soul," said Professor Williams. "They saw themselves as guardians of life throughout the galaxy. Every species they encountered was given help to reach their full potential." Commander Rick Stone had been studying the military aspects of the records. What he found made him uncomfortable. Their technology was incredibly advanced, but they used it for protection, not conquest. They had weapons that could destroy entire fleets, but the records show they almost never used them. They preferred to teach other species to defend themselves. Dr. Palmer found the most heartbreaking part of the story. As the cosmic disaster approached, the Keepers had faced an impossible choice. Their own star charts showed exactly what would happen. The explosion would send waves of deadly radiation across vast areas of the galaxy. Their own colonies would be destroyed, but so would the younger civilizations they had been protecting. "They could have saved themselves," she said quietly. "Their technology was advanced enough that they could have built shelters or moved their entire civilization to safety. But instead, they chose to use all their remaining resources to protect the other species." The records showed the Keepers working desperately in their final years. They built massive protective barriers around inhabited worlds. They hid their most dangerous technology where it could not be misused. They created archives like the Crystal Tower to preserve knowledge for future generations. And they used the last of their power to shield entire star systems from the coming disaster. "The sacrifice they made was total," said Dr. Turner. "They gave up everything they had built over thousands of years. their cities, their technology, their entire way of life. All to save species that most of them had never even met. But perhaps the most incredible part was what happened next. The surviving keepers had returned to Earth, choosing to live simple lives among their primitive human cousins. They had deliberately let their advanced knowledge fade away rather than risk it being used for war or domination. They became farmers, craftsmen, teachers, said Professor Williams. They married into primitive human tribes and had children. Over generations, their advanced knowledge was lost, but their genetic gifts remained. The intelligence, the curiosity, the drive to explore that characterizes modern humans. These are not accidents of evolution. They are gifts from the keepers. Captain. Morrison felt a chill as he realized the implications. You are saying that every human alive today is descended from these ancient space travelers? Not just descended from them, said Dr. Palmer. We are them. Modern humanity carries the genetic legacy of the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. The keepers did not just save other species. They saved themselves by becoming us. Meanwhile, the records revealed what had happened to the species the keepers had protected. Cut off from their teachers and guardians, these civilizations had continued to develop on their own. But they retained memories of the keepers, memories that had grown into legends and myths over thousands of years. To them, the keepers became known as the ancients, explained Dr. Turner. Godlike beings who had once ruled the galaxy and might someday return. Every advanced species we have encountered probably has legends about them. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not just another young species stumbling into the galactic community. They were the children of its founders, the inheritors of a legacy that spanned the entire galaxy. Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez had been studying the technical specifications hidden in the archives. These power systems, these faster-than-light drives, these terraforming technologies. If we could understand even a fraction of this knowledge, we could transform human civilization overnight. But Dr. Palmer had found something even more important. Hidden in the deepest levels of the archive were genetic codes and biological data about the keepers themselves. They were not just advanced humans, she said. They had modified themselves over thousands of years. Enhanced intelligence, longer lifespans, better resistance to radiation and disease. And according to these records, they passed many of these modifications down to their descendants. Us, said Captain Morrison quietly. Us, she confirmed. The records suggest that humans have genetic potential that we have never fully accessed. Physical and mental capabilities that we have inherited but never learned to use. As word of the discovery began to spread through the ship, reactions were mixed. Some crew members were excited by the idea that humanity had such an incredible heritage. Others were worried about what would happen when other alien species learned the truth. For centuries, other civilizations have lived in fear of the ancients. Returning, said Commander Stone. What happens when they discover that the ancients never left, that we are their descendants? Dr. Turner had been thinking about the same question. Some species might welcome us as the inheritors of ancient wisdom. Others might see us as a threat that needs to be eliminated before we can reclaim our ancestors' power. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery came when Professor Williams found references to other archive sites scattered across the galaxy. The Crystal Tower on Kepler 442b was not unique. There were hundreds of similar facilities hidden on worlds throughout known space. Each archive contains different aspects of keeper knowledge, she explained. This one focused on history and culture, but there are others that contain military technology, scientific data, even the locations of hidden keeper bases that might still be operational. Captain Morrison realized that they had stumbled onto something much bigger than a single alien ruin. They had found the key to unlocking humanity's true heritage, and with it, technology and knowledge that could change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. "We need to contact Earth Command immediately," he said. "This information is too important to keep to ourselves." But as he prepared to send his report, Jake Morrison wondered if humanity was ready for such a revelation. Learning that they were the descendants of the galaxy's ancient masters would change everything. It would change how humans saw themselves, how other species saw them, and how everyone understood the history of galactic civilization. The Keepers had hidden their legacy for good reasons. Now their descendants would have to decide whether the galaxy was finally ready for the truth. The message from Captain Morrison reached Earth Command in just 3 days. Admiral Ben Clark read the report twice before he believed what he was seeing. Advanced human civilization, galactic empire, ancient protectors. It sounded like science fiction, but the evidence was too strong to ignore. "Get me the president," Admiral Clark told his aide, "and contact every department head. We need an emergency meeting within the hour." Within 6 hours, the discovery had reached the highest levels of human government. The president called together scientists, military leaders, and diplomats from around the world. The room was filled with disbelief and excitement as they watched the holographic recordings that Captain Morrison had sent. "Are we certain about this?" asked Dr. Robert Kim, the head of Earth's Science Council. "This suggests that our entire understanding of human evolution is wrong." Admiral Clark nodded grimly. "Captain Morrison has sent us detailed scans and translations. Our best experts have confirmed it. These records are real, and they are definitely human in origin." But news this big could not be kept secret for long. Within days, rumors began spreading through human colonies across space. Stories of ancient human ruins, of technology beyond anything modern civilization could build, of a forgotten heritage among the stars. Some people were thrilled by the discovery. Finally, humanity had proof that they belonged among the stars. They were not just lucky newcomers to galactic civilization. They were the children of its founders. Others were worried. If humans really were descended from the galaxy's ancient masters, what would other alien species think? For thousands of years, those species had lived in fear of the ancients returning. Now they might learn that the ancients had never left. Captain Morrison and his crew continued their work on Kepler 442b. Dr. Palmer had made contact with other human ships in the area, and together they were exploring more of the ancient sites. Each discovery revealed new wonders and new questions. "We found another archive today," reported Commander Stone during their daily briefing. "This one contains technical specifications for faster-than-light engines that are centuries ahead of our current technology." Chief Engineer Rodriguez was practically dancing with excitement. The power systems alone could revolutionize human space travel. We could cross the galaxy in months instead of years. But the most important discovery came when they found reference to other species in the ancient records. The Keepers had detailed files on dozens of alien civilizations, including many that humans had already made contact with. "Look at this," said Dr. Palmer, pointing to a holographic display. "The Zephyrians, the Velathi, the Corvani Empire. The Keepers had contact with all of them thousands of years ago. These files contain detailed information about their cultures, their biology, even their languages." Professor Williams had been studying the cultural records. According to these files, many of these species still have legends about the ancients. They remember the Keepers, but their memories have been twisted by time into stories of godlike beings who once ruled the galaxy. The implications were staggering. Humanity was about to make contact with species who had spent millennia fearing the return of their ancestors. On the Zephyrian homeworld, President Nina Hayes was dealing with her own crisis. Ancient prophecies spoke of the day when the children of the ancients would return from the third planet of the yellow star. The descriptions matched the humans perfectly, and her people were beginning to panic. What do our historians say? She asked her council. The prophecies are clear, replied Chief Historian Valthera. The ancients' children will have the same adaptability that allowed their ancestors to survive in any environment. They will have the same curiosity that drove them to explore every corner of the galaxy. And they will have the same stubborn determination that made them never give up, even when facing impossible odds. That sounds exactly like the humans we have met, said General Corvash. President Hayes nodded slowly. The Zephyrians had been trading with humans for several years, and they had always been impressed by human resilience and ingenuity. If the prophecies were true, it explained everything, but not all reactions were positive. In the Corvani Empire, the news was causing massive upheaval. The Corvani had built their entire society around the belief that they were the galaxy's natural rulers, destined to control other species until the ancients returned to destroy them all. Impossible, declared Supreme Commander Drakvizoth when he heard the reports. Humans are weak, primitive creatures. They cannot be descended from the ancients. But his own intelligence officers were finding evidence that supported the human claims. Ancient ruins on Corvani worlds showed the same architectural style as the human discoveries. Old stories told of beings who looked remarkably like humans, teaching the early Corvani how to build their first cities. Sir, said Intelligence Chief Marrakesh carefully, our analysis suggests the human claims may be accurate. The genetic markers, the technological similarities, the historical records, everything matches. Supreme Commander Vezov felt his world crumbling around him. If humans really were the children of the ancients, then everything the Corvani believed about their destiny was wrong. Worse, it meant they had been living in fear of creatures who were actually their ancient benefactors. Meanwhile, other alien species were having their own revelations. The peaceful Valathi Confederation had always treasured their ancient stories of wise teachers who had helped their ancestors learn to live in harmony with nature. When they compared those stories to the human discoveries, the similarities were unmistakable. The guardians of our legends, said High Counselor Ayla Ven to her fellow leaders. They matched the humans in every detail. Their appearance, their behavior, even their strange ability to form emotional bonds with other species. The Valathi had always liked humans, finding them easier to work with than most other species. Now they understood why. Humans were the descendants of the very beings who had taught the Valathi their core values of cooperation and mutual respect. But back on Earth, the discovery was causing its own problems. Some humans believed they should use their ancient heritage to claim dominance over other species. Admiral Clark found himself dealing with military officers who wanted to find more, keeper technology, and use it to build a human empire. We are the inheritors of the galaxy's greatest civilization, argued Captain Mike Davis during a heated meeting. We should take our rightful place as the galaxy's rulers. That is exactly the kind of thinking the Keepers rejected, replied Captain Morrison, who had returned to Earth to help analyze the discoveries. They gave up their empire rather than use their power to dominate others. The debate raged for weeks. Some wanted to immediately search for more Keeper sites and claim their technology. Others argued for a more careful approach, sharing their discoveries with other species rather than hoarding them. The argument was settled when Dr. Palmer made the most incredible discovery yet. While exploring a newly found archive site near Mars, her team had discovered something that changed everything. Admiral, she said, her voice shaking with excitement as she called Earth Command. You need to get here immediately. We found something impossible. When Admiral Clark arrived at the Mars site, Dr. Palmer led him deep underground to a facility that had been hidden beneath the planet's surface for thousands of years. The technology here was even more advanced than what they had found on Kepler 442b. But the real shock came when they reached the central chamber. There, in crystalline preservation chambers, were dozens of figures in perfect suspended animation. They looked exactly human, but their clothes and equipment were clearly from the Keeper era. "They are alive," whispered Dr. Ellen Foster, who was leading the medical team. "Somehow, after all these thousands of years, they are still alive." "Admiral." Clark stared at the sleeping figures. "These are actual keepers?" "The real thing," confirmed Dr. Palmer. "Our own ancestors, waiting for the day when their descendants would be ready to learn the truth." The discovery sent shockwaves through human society and beyond. Not only were humans descended from the ancient keepers, but some of the original keepers were still alive. The question now was whether humanity was ready to wake them up and learn what they had to say. As word of the discovery spread, reactions from other species became more intense. Some saw it as proof that the prophecies were coming true. Others feared that the return of the ancients would mean the end of their independence. But for humanity, the discovery raised the biggest question of all. If they woke up the keepers, would their ancestors approve of what humanity had become? Or would they be disappointed by how far their descendants had fallen from the ideals of protection and service that had defined the original keeper civilization? The galaxy was about to change forever, and no one knew if it would be for better or worse. The first keeper to wake up was a woman who called herself Elena. When her eyes opened after thousands of years of sleep, she looked around the medical chamber with calm understanding, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. "How long has it been?" she asked Dr. Ellen Foster in perfect English. "About 50,000 years," Dr. Foster replied, still amazed that the woman could speak at all. Elena sat up slowly, testing her muscles. "Then it is time. Our children have finally grown strong enough to find us." Within hours, Elena was sitting in the council chambers of New Geneva, surrounded by Earth's most powerful leaders. She looked exactly like a modern human, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of incredible age and wisdom. "We knew this day would come," Elena told the assembled leaders. "We designed it into your genetic code. The curiosity that drives you to explore, the ability to adapt to any environment, the refusal to give up when others would surrender. These are not accidents of evolution. They are gifts we gave you." Admiral Clark leaned forward in his chair. "Why did you give up your civilization? Why not just rebuild after the disaster?" Elena's expression grew sad. "Because we learned that power corrupts, even when used with the best intentions. For 10,000 years, we ruled the galaxy as benevolent dictators. We told ourselves we were helping other species, but we were also controlling them. When the cosmic disaster came, we saw it as a chance to break that cycle. President Sarah Manning, Earth's current leader, asked the question everyone was thinking. What do you expect from us now? Nothing, Elena replied simply. We gave up our right to rule when we chose to sleep. This is your galaxy now. We will share what we know, but the choices are yours to make. But even as Elena was sharing her wisdom with Earth's leaders, dark clouds were gathering across the galaxy. News of the Keeper's return had spread to every inhabited system, and reactions were becoming violent. The Corvani Empire was mobilizing for war. Supreme Commander Vizov had decided that if the ancients had truly returned, they must be destroyed before they could reclaim their power. Massive fleets were moving toward human space, carrying weapons designed to sterilize entire planets. We will not bow down to these false gods, Vizov declared to his officers. The Corvani Empire will not be slaves again. Admiral Clark found himself preparing for a war nobody wanted. The human fleet was advanced, but small compared to the massive Corvani armadas now approaching Earth. Even worse, other species were choosing sides, with some supporting humanity, while others joined the Corvani out of fear. Captain Morrison, now commanding a task force of ships hastily converted from exploration vessels to warships, was patrolling the outer edges of human space when he made a crucial discovery. On a remote planet at the edge of Corvani territory, his scanners detected the same energy signatures they had found at the Keeper sites. "Another archive," reported Dr. Palmer, who had joined Morrison's fleet, "but this one is different. The energy readings are much stronger." When they investigated the planet, they found not just an archive, but an entire Keeper military base, hidden beneath the surface for thousands of years. The automated systems were still active, maintaining a network of defensive platforms throughout the sector. Chief Engineer Rodriguez worked with Elena, who had insisted on joining the expedition to understand the ancient systems. "These weapons could destroy the entire Corvani fleet," he said in amazement. "The power levels are beyond anything we have ever seen." But Elena's voice carried a warning. These weapons were hidden for a reason. The Keepers swore never again to use their power to dominate others. "Will you honor that oath, or repeat the mistakes that nearly destroyed us?" Captain Morrison stared at the weapon controls. With the push of a button, he could end the war before it started. The Corvani fleet would be wiped out, and humanity would be safe. But it would also mean becoming the very thing the Keepers had refused to be. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the other. Awakened Keepers were sharing their knowledge freely with human scientists. Dr. Alex Turner worked with them to develop new propulsion systems that could cross the galaxy in weeks. Professor Kate Williams helped unlock medical advances that could extend human life for centuries. But the most incredible revelation came when Elena showed them the true scope of the Keeper network. Every star system in the galaxy contained hidden facilities, each one programmed to respond only to the genetic signatures of Earth-born humans. "You have not just inherited a few ruins," Elena explained to the assembled leaders. "You have inherited the infrastructure of an entire galactic civilization. Every defensive platform, every archive, every hidden base. All of it is waiting for you to claim it." The temptation was enormous. With Keeper technology, humanity could become the galaxy's undisputed masters. No other species would be able to challenge them. The Corvani Empire would be forced to surrender, and peace would be imposed across all worlds. But Elena could see the hunger in their eyes, and it worried her. "Power is seductive," she warned. "It whispers that you can solve every problem, end every conflict, bring peace to the galaxy. But that is how tyranny begins, with the best of intentions." As the Corvani fleet drew closer to Earth, the pressure to use the Keeper weapons grew stronger. Admiral Clark was running out of options. His ships could not match the firepower of the approaching armada, and millions of human lives were at stake. "We have to use the weapons," argued Captain Davis during an emergency meeting. "If we do not, Earth will be destroyed. And if we do use them, we become everything our ancestors rejected," replied Captain Morrison. "We become the galactic tyrants they refused to be." The debate raged as the Corvani fleet entered the outer solar system. Other alien fleets were arriving too, some to support humanity, and others to join the attack. The space around Earth was filling with warships from dozens of species, all preparing for a battle that could destroy civilizations. Elena made a proposal that stunned everyone. "Let me talk to them," she said simply. "Let me tell them the truth about what the Keepers really were." "They will never listen," said Admiral Clark. "The Corvani have convinced themselves that this is a holy war." "Then we will make them listen," Elena replied. "We will use the one weapon the Keepers perfected above all others: truth." Working with Captain Narration and Dr. Palmer, Elena prepared a message that would be broadcast across the galaxy using the ancient Keeper communication networks. It would reach every inhabited world, every species that had ever heard legends of the ancients. The message was simple but powerful. Elena told the story of the Keepers as it really happened, not as godlike rulers or terrifying conquerors, but as teachers and protectors who had given everything to ensure that life could flourish throughout the galaxy. She spoke of their final choice, to sacrifice their empire rather than rule through fear. She explained how they had hidden their weapons, not to threaten others, but to ensure that power would never again be concentrated in the hands of a few. Most importantly, she made it clear that their descendants, the humans, had not returned to reclaim an empire. They had returned to continue the Keeper's true mission of protection and growth. The broadcast reached the Corvani fleet just as they were preparing to attack. Supreme Commander Vizov listened to Elena's words with growing confusion and then horror as he realized what his people had believed for thousands of years was wrong. The ancients had never been conquerors. They had been protectors, guardians, who had sacrificed everything for species like the Corvani. And now their descendants were offering friendship, not domination. Other species across the galaxy heard the message too. The Zephyrians felt their ancient prophecies finally make sense. The Valathi recognized the return of the wise teachers their ancestors had loved. But the real test was still to come. Words were easy, but actions would prove whether humanity had truly learned the lessons. Their ancestors had died to teach them as the opposing fleets faced each other in the darkness of space. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance. Would this be the beginning of a new age of cooperation, or would old fears and hatreds drag everyone into a war that could destroy civilizations? The moment of truth came as thousands of ships filled the space around Earth. Admiral Clark watched his screens as the massive Corvani fleet approached, their weapons ready to fire. Behind them came ships from a dozen other species, some coming to help and others coming to destroy. Captain Morrison floated in his command chair aboard his flagship, his finger hovering over the controls that would activate the ancient Keeper weapons. One touch, and the most powerful military force in the galaxy would be wiped out in seconds. But Elena's words echoed in his mind. Would this make him a protector or a tyrant? Then something unexpected happened. A single ship broke away from the Yath Corvani fleet and approached the human lines under a flag of truce. The ship's commander identified himself as Zektar, a Corvani officer who had been listening to Elena's broadcast. "I request permission to speak with the human leaders," Zektar said over the communication channel. His voice was uncertain, confused. "I need to understand what my people have been told." Admiral Clark agreed to the meeting, and within hours Zektar was aboard the human flagship. He was a tall, powerful warrior with the typical Corvani armor and weapons, but his eyes showed doubt rather than anger. "For my entire life, I was taught that the ancients were monsters," Zektar said as he sat across from Elena. "We believed they would return to enslave us all. But your message speaks of teachers and protectors. How do I know which story is true?" Elena smiled sadly. "Let me show you something," she said, and activated a holographic display. It showed scenes from thousands of years ago, when young Corvani were learning to build their first cities with help from Keeper engineers. "These are your ancestors," Elena explained. "The Keepers taught them how to work metal, how to build machines, how to reach for the stars. We never asked for worship or obedience. We only wanted to help you grow." Zektar stared at the images with growing amazement. The ancient Corvani in the holograms looked happy, not enslaved. They were working side by side with the Keepers as equals, not as servants. "Why did you leave us?" he asked quietly. "Because staying would have made us your masters," Elena replied. "We learned that even the kindest ruler is still a ruler. Better to let you make your own choices, even if some of those choices led to conflict." As word of Zektar's meeting spread through the Corvani fleet, other officers began to question their orders. Some ships broke away from the main force, refusing to attack the descendants of the beings who had once helped their people. But Supreme Commander Vizov was not ready to give up. "Lies and propaganda," he declared to his remaining officers. "The humans are trying to trick us with false history. We will not be fooled." The first shots were fired by Vezoth's flagship, massive energy beams that lit up the darkness of space. But instead of firing back, Captain Morrison did something that surprised everyone. He activated the Keeper defensive systems, not to attack, but to protect. Ancient shield generators that had been hidden throughout the solar system came online, creating barriers that absorbed the Corvani weapons' fire harmlessly. The human ships took no damage, but they also did not return fire. "Sir, we could destroy them easily," reported Morrison's weapons officer. "The Keeper systems are fully charged and ready." "No," Morrison said firmly. "We defend, but we do not attack. Let them see who we really are." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Corvani fired again and again, their weapons striking the Keeper shields without effect, but the humans never fired back. Instead, they began broadcasting something else entirely. Dr. Palmer had been working with the Awakened Keepers to unlock medical files from the ancient archives. Now human ships began transmitting medical data to the Corvani fleet, information about diseases that had been ravaging Corvani colonies for years. "Why are they sending us medical data?" asked a confused Corvani officer. "Because that is what the ancients did," Sektar replied, his understanding growing. "They helped, they healed, they protected." As the medical information spread through the Corvani fleet, officers began to realize that the humans were offering solutions to problems that had killed thousands of their people. The plague that had devastated the outer colonies, the genetic disorders that affected Corvani children, the radiation sickness from their damaged homeworld. The humans had cures for all of it. The effect was immediate and powerful. Ship after ship in the Corvani fleet stopped firing and began requesting more medical data. Officers who had come to destroy Earth were now asking for help to save their own people. Supreme Commander Vezoth watched his fleet dissolve around him as his own officers refused to continue the attack. "You are all traitors," he raged, but even his own bridge crew was beginning to doubt him. "Sir," said his second-in-command carefully, "the humans just transmitted the cure for the sickness that killed my daughter. If they were really our enemies, why would they help us?" Across the galaxy, other species were watching the confrontation and coming to their own conclusions. The peaceful Velathi had always believed in the goodness of the ancient teachers, and now they saw their faith confirmed. Velathi ships joined the human defensive lines, not to fight, but to help distribute medical aid. The Zephyrians sent their own fleet, but instead of weapons, their ships carried supplies and food for refugee populations that had been displaced by the conflict. President Nina Hayes had decided that if the prophecies were true, then her people would fulfill their ancient role as allies of the ancients. Children, even species that had initially supported the Corvani, began to change sides. The humans' refusal to use their superior weapons, combined with their willingness to share life-saving knowledge, proved that Elena's words were true. Dr. Palmer established the first interspecies medical institute aboard one of the human ships, working with doctors from dozens of worlds to share Keeper medical knowledge. Each breakthrough saved lives across multiple species, building trust that had been impossible before. The war that everyone had feared never truly happened. Instead, what emerged was something unprecedented in galactic history. Species that had been enemies for centuries began working together, guided by human knowledge but not controlled by human power. Elena found herself serving as an advisor rather than a ruler, exactly as she had hoped. "We had our time," she told Captain Morrison as they watched mixed fleets of human and alien ships working together. "This is your galaxy now. We will share what we know, but the choices and the mistakes are yours to make." Captain Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, looked out at the incredible sight. Corvani engineers were working with human scientists to develop new technologies. Zephyrian artists were collaborating with Velathi philosophers to document the real history of the ancients. Even former enemies were finding common ground in their shared amazement at what they were learning. The Keepers kept their greatest promise after all, Morrison said quietly. Their children finally came home, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Supreme Commander Vizov had been arrested by his own officers and was facing trial for war crimes. But even he would benefit from Keeper justice, which focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment. Elena had suggested that he be given the chance to learn the true history of his people, to understand how fear and lies had twisted the noble Kavani into would-be tyrants. Months later, as Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Keeper Memorial Station above Earth, he reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy was entering a new age of cooperation, one where knowledge was shared freely and conflicts were resolved through understanding rather than forced. Dr. Palmer's archaeological teams were uncovering Keeper sites throughout the galaxy, each one revealing new wonders and new technologies. But more importantly, they were also uncovering the histories of dozens of species, helping them understand their own forgotten pasts and connections to each other. The revelation that humanity was descended from the galaxy's ancient protectors had changed everything, but perhaps not in the way anyone had expected. Rather than claiming dominion over other species, humans found themselves inheriting a responsibility to protect, to nurture, and to ensure that the galaxy remained a place where all forms of life could thrive. For centuries they feared the ancients, Admiral Morrison murmured, echoing the words that had started their incredible journey. If only they had known that the ancients never left. They just learned to hope instead of rule. The age of fear was ending, and the age of cooperation had begun. And this time, nobody would face the darkness alone.